Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. The NOAA Central Library Seminar Program is very excited to have you for our continuation of the Ecosystem-Based Fisheries Management Seminar Series. I'm Katie, and I will be your library host today. If you have any technical questions or issues, as in you can't see the slides or you cannot hear, please try logging off and logging back in. That solves most GoToWebinar issues. You are muted as an attendee for this seminar, and we will hold all your questions until the presentation is finished. So please make sure you type those questions into the question panel. And also please note that this presentation is being recorded, and your name or email and any questions you have will be shared with the presenter after the fact. And if you want to pass this on to a colleague after the fact, or if you have to step away, please note that this will be up on the library's YouTube channel. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Peg, who is going to introduce our speaker.
Thank you very much, Katie. This is Peg Brady from NOAA Fisheries. Welcome to our continuing series on EBM, the 2021 series. We had started this series back in November of 2017, and our main objectives were really to showcase the excellent projects that are being implemented throughout NOAA Fisheries and our partners to advance ecosystem-based management with a focus on fisheries, to increase awareness regarding EBM with a focus on better understanding of marine ecosystems, and to enable NOAA Fisheries staff to highlight their ecosystem-oriented work. I want to thank Katie and her team at the NOAA Library, who's been a co-host since the beginning back in November 2017. These seminars are held on the second Wednesday of each month at the same time, 3 p.m. And each presentation is publicly accessible, recorded as Katie just highlighted. And if anyone's interested in our past recordings, please visit the NOAA Library website. You can see our archives going back to the early days. Following the presentation, there's an opportunity or you can post your questions actually during the presentation, and Stephanie will respond to those questions as best she can. And if there's a more detailed one, she can take it offline. She'll have her contact information as well. We're very lucky today to really highlight the excellent work that NOAA's Integrated Ecosystem Assessment Program has done for the last 10 years. Stephanie Oakes is our current program manager for as we call it, the IEA program, which has really been the backbone of much of our ecosystem-based management work in fisheries, and has had a long history throughout the country in advancing better understanding marine ecosystems and providing the information. So I want to thank Stephanie and her team across the country who has helped contribute to this work today that you'll hear, and also to the publication that she will be highlighting today. And I'll talk a little bit more about our next presentation on April 14th at the close. So Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katie and Peg. And thank you all for joining today's seminar to talk about NOAA's Integrated Ecosystem Assessments, or IEAs. As mentioned, I'm Stephanie Oakes with NOAA Fisheries in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I serve as the NOAA IEA Program Manager. So first, I'm going to provide some background on the IEA program. Then I'll introduce the special issue of Coastal Management Journal that was recently published covering IEAs, provide some highlights from each of the manuscripts, and discuss some future directions for the IEA program. Integrated ecosystem assessments support NOAA's mission by advancing NOAA's ecosystem science and management enterprise to ensure the social, economic, and sustainable viability of our marine ecosystems. After more than 10 years of implementing IEAs, NOAA scientists have built relationships with stakeholders and managers to provide the ecosystem science necessary to balance the needs of nature and society for current and future generations. Today, I'm going to provide some highlights from a recent special issue on IEAs. But first, I wanted to provide some background. IEAs provide a scalable, collaborative, and adaptable framework to guide implementation of ecosystem-based management, or EBM. The IEA framework integrates all components of an ecosystem, including human needs and activities. This enables managers to balance trade-offs in their decision-making process and guides the science to be done at scales that are relevant to management questions. Through collaboration, management partners can inform the process and the products that are developed using the IEA framework. This graphic here highlights milestones throughout more than 10 years of planning and implementing IEAs. IEAs first came under NOAA's purview in 2005. This resulted after NOAA's Science Advisory Board recommended that the agency use IEAs to organize science to inform marine ecosystem-based management. The board stated that NOAA must make integrated assessments the normal mode of business. For several years, NOAA worked to develop IEAs, incorporating the many recommendations that were provided. In 2009, NOAA scientists published a paper outlining guidance for implementing an IEA. This provided greater visibility for NOAA's IEA approach in the scientific community. Since then, the article has been cited over 400 times, and the body of NOAA IEA literature has grown significantly with high impact. In 2010, IEAs finally made it into the presidential budget, and that led to the formalizing of NOAA's IEA program. The following year, in 2011, the IEA team held their first national IEA all-scientist meeting. The following year, the program established a steering committee, and in 2014, the first national strategic plan and regional 3-year implementation plans were developed. And this year, we're currently working on the 3rd iteration of those plans. At the 2019 IEA All-Scientist meeting in Silver Spring, one goal was to develop a special issue of Coastal Management Journal covering 10 years for the IEA program. Before we get to the special issue, I'll provide a little more background. As seen in the milestones, the NOAA IEA program formalized in 2010. While the IEA program is administratively housed in NOAA Fisheries Office of Science and Technology, it's a multi-region, cross-line office, NOAA-wide program, and this is reflected in the makeup of the steering committee. The steering committee is composed of members from each participating line office in each active region, as listed here on the slide. We also have included the ability to bring on advisory members when a particular area of expertise is needed. Currently, we have members for human dimensions or socioeconomics and climate change. The steering committee has been a very effective group that works well to develop the future direction for the program. In January of 2021, we published a special issue in Coastal Management Journal that focuses on various aspects of NOAA's IEAs. My co-guest editors are Ellen Spooner, Chris Harvey, Chris Kelbel, and Mark Monaco. So now I'd like to provide a high-level overview of the work of our regional IEA teams as outlined in the special issue. The special issue includes an introductory overview and 6 main manuscripts listed here, covering recent IEA work. The second paper describes the origin of the IEA framework and the NOAA IEA program through the reflections of 5 leaders in the development of the program. The third paper reviews 5 case studies that demonstrate how IEA Approach builds resilient coastal ecosystems, communities, and economies through trusted relationships. The fourth paper looks at 7 case studies to identify effective strategies and general principles for indicator development. The fifth paper discusses the state of open data science practices in IEAs across the United States. And the sixth paper details adapting the IEA framework to implement ecosystem approaches to fisheries management in the Mid-Atlantic region. And the final paper looks at goes beyond the standard measures of economic welfare to evaluate well-being of humans and the status of ecosystems. The introduction to the special issue provides a high-level summary of the papers in the issue while emphasizing how the IEA program has helped NOAA to coordinate regional IEA teams, draw on multiple lines of expertise to advance ecosystem-based management, and make significant strides in addressing the coupling of natural and social sciences with local, regional, and national scales of governance in order to advance EBM. During the IEA All Scientists meeting in 2019, the panel was convened to discuss the origins of the IEA framework and the NOAA IEA program. These are described in the second paper of the special issue. 5 leaders in the early days of IEAs shared how the IEA program was developed in the early 2000s. This was done in response to calls from the NOAA Science Advisory Board to coordinate across NOAA and advance ecosystem-based management, as I mentioned it earlier. They discussed the IEA approach as a call to action for scientists and agencies to support EBM. Following decades of growing support for EBM in the ecosystem and social science communities, they conceived an adaptable, scalable, and non-prescriptive framework that was applicable to a range of issues and shifting management and governance structures. They also described how the IEA approach did not threaten to replace the current management approaches, but provided processes, tools, and products to complement current management. The panel were asked to provide recommendations for future development of the IEA approach in the next 10 years. These recommendations included areas such as broadening the stakeholder base, increasing development of readily updatable real-time products, and strengthening support for IEAs by effectively communicating the stories. Steps towards meeting the recommendations are demonstrated in some of the work covered today and exemplify how coordination across NOAA to implement IEAs has successfully advanced EBM. Since the establishment of the program, NOAA scientists have used the IEA approach to build trust and meaningful relationships with a variety of stakeholders and managers. The third paper highlights 5 case studies that demonstrate how the NOAA IEA approach can be adapted to provide the ecosystem science, including social science, that's required. Building resilient ecosystems requires more than managing individual resources, but also the integration of human needs and activities. These case studies provide examples for how scientists use the IEA approach to incorporate these components. The case study included co-development of conceptual models for focal fisheries in Sitka, Alaska, and the co-development of a conceptual model for red tide impacts on the West Florida shelf that led to development of a new citizen-based monitoring effort. Information about that can be found at floridawatermen.org. The third case study shows how the IEA framework was adapted to pilot ecological risk assessment with the state, NGOs, and local partners in the California current. Fourth case study shows how the IEA approach was used to work with communities to understand ecosystem services links to human well-being and to support the 30 by 30 conservation initiative in Hawaii. The last case study looks at how IEA teams have partnered with the national marine sanctuaries to update condition reports, develop conceptual models, and indicators. These case studies demonstrate how IEAs have broadened diversity in the stakeholder base and increased collaboration across disciplines and resource sectors. Crucial to this success was the communication, trust, and meaningful connections that the scientists built with stakeholders, partners, and managers over the years. An important step in the IEA approach is identifying, selecting, and developing a portfolio of indicators to measure key components of the ecosystem. The fourth paper in the special issue reviews how indicators were identified in case studies from 7 different ecosystems over the first years of the IEA program. Their goals were to identify effective strategies and highlight general principles for effective development of scientifically and socially relevant indicators. The authors reviewed indicator development case studies from 7 socio-ecological systems. These are in West Hawaii, the Eastern Bering Sea and Sitka, Alaska, Washington State, and 3 of the national marine sanctuaries. They found the IEA framework provided a good approach to developing indicators across different geographic scales and partnerships. They emphasize that organizing principles to guide the process and a balance between quantitative methods and qualitative stakeholder input were important to indicator development. The co-development of conceptual models was found to satisfy the scoping step of the IEA framework and lead to meaning indicator development. They also found information exchange across regions advanced indicator development by leveraging limited resources. And when innovative visual approaches were used to engage partners and stakeholders, it built trust and communication while enhancing the range of indicators. The lessons in this case study will help future indicator development efforts with transdisciplinary challenges of managing integrated social ecological systems. IEAs are developed at varying spatial scales with specific goals and audiences in mind, so they are by nature unique. Each step of the IEA process provides an opportunity for data input and product output. The approaches to implementing IEAs are context-specific, but the challenges in data acquisition, management, processing, analysis, and communication are universal. In order to address these challenges, IEA scientists have begun to adopt open data science and to provide public access to scientific data, methods, and products. The fifth paper in the special issue provides a snapshot of the state of open data science practices in IEAs across the United States. The authors mapped the steps in the scientific workflow model of Wickham and Grolemund to tasks required to develop IEA products. The initial time investment necessary for developing open science workflows was substantial, but it has paid off by providing for the efficient and transparent development of IEA products. Adoption of open science has improved the flexibility, reproducibility, and efficiency of the scientific workflows within the IEA framework. By improving the implementation of IEAs, open science tools and principles have the potential to further ecosystem-based management. The Mid-Atlantic region spans federal waters from North Carolina through New York, with 14 managed species covered by 7 fishery management plans. The Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council developed ecosystem approaches to fisheries management back in 2016. Subsequently, the Council worked with IEA scientists to adapt each step of the IEA approach to address species, fleet, habitat, and climate interactions in fisheries under the Council's management. The sixth paper in the special issue details how the process taken by the Council and IEA scientists helped to identify high-priority fisheries and their components. The decision framework that was developed allowed for an extensive, positive, and collaborative process between managers, stakeholders, and scientists. The Council worked with the Northeast IEA team to adapt the flexible IEA approach to a structured decision framework. The initial step was a risk assessment used to prioritize fishery ecosystem interactions for consideration and management. The second step was to develop a conceptual model that considers high-risk factors and ecosystem elements. The third step was to use a conceptual model to identify 3 priority summer flounder management questions to be considered for quantitative management strategy evaluation, or MSCs. MSCs are in process for 2021, with the results tentatively expected in 2022. And finally, once management strategies are implemented, the outcomes will be monitored and the process will be adjusted. This is a great example where a management partner is working with IEA scientists to implement the full range of the IEA process to bring ecosystem science into management. Finally, an important component of ecosystem-based management is considering human needs and activities when making management decisions. The 7th paper addresses the need to look beyond standard measures of economic welfare in communities when evaluating the well-being of humans and the status of ecosystems. Other kinds of well-being derived from the environment and from fisheries should be considered. The IEA approach was adapted to develop locally relevant well-being indicators for Sitka, Alaska, which is one of the most highly engaged fishing communities in the United States. The authors explore how well-being indicators provide information on local values. They found that complex dynamics between community well-being and fisheries can be difficult to conceptualize and integrate into management decisions. For example, decline in population in an aging community, along with increasing food and energy costs, may not only affect subsistence and commercial fishing participation, but subsistence shellfish harvest as well. This resulted in consideration of a food safety indicator for the community indicator portfolio. These indicators resulting from this work can be used to track changes in fisheries that may manifest in social systems. And ultimately, this work can facilitate incorporation of human dimensions into ecosystem-based fisheries management frameworks and provide context for engagement of local stakeholders in resource management. So to wrap up, I want to emphasize the importance of strong partnerships. Over the years of the IEA program has learned how to better provide the science and products needed for managers, stakeholders, and communities to address the issues that their ecosystems face. Managers, stakeholders, and others have become full partners in the process, with their objectives leading the way. This means the IEA approach has guided engagement to be early and often in product development and throughout the process, so that managers can provide feedback and input to ensure the products are meeting their needs. Trusted relationships have been built and are continuously worked on to establish confidence in these relationships. This has taken the IEA program and the scientists working for it a lot of dedicated time and is important as more partners are using the IEA approach. As the IEA teams look to the future, we need to balance the current IEA work with interest in expanding IEA efforts in a limited resource environment. For example, there are nascent efforts in the South Atlantic and Caribbean taking up the IEA framework. We also are reassessing management strategy evaluation step of the IEA process to include multiple approaches to evaluate strategies. We're updating IEA products from static reports to easily accessed, regularly updated digital products. And examples of those can be found on the NOAA IEA website project pages. And ultimately, the long view is to facilitate the uptake of EBM by management agencies. So integrated ecosystem assessments will continue to support NOAA's mission by advancing NOAA's ecosystem science and management enterprise to ensure social, economic, and sustainable viability of our marine ecosystems. For the next 10 years, IEAs will continue to build relationships with stakeholders and managers to provide the ecosystem science necessary to balance the needs of nature and society. And with that, I would like to acknowledge the regional IEA teams and contributing authors to the special issue. You know who you are, and you're too many to list. I'd also like to acknowledge the NOAA IEA Steering Committee for their efforts to guide the program, to Coastal Management Journal editorial staff for helping us with our guest editing, and to my co-guest editors. And with that, there's more information can be found at integratedecosystemassessment.noaa.gov. And the special issue is available on Taylor and Francis's website and has been published open access, so everybody can read the articles and find out more about the great work done by our IEA teams. And with that, I would be happy to take questions.
Great presentation, Stephanie. Thank you so much. While people are thinking of their questions and typing them away in the chat, Peg, do you have any questions you wanted to kick us off with?
Thank you very much, Katie. No, I'm all set right now. I think we'll just turn it over to folks. I'm sure there are folks out there that have a number of questions and want to give them time. So again, Stephanie, excellent job. Thank you so much for presentation and the acknowledgement for all the work that's being done by all the teams across the country.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Apparently we don't have any questions, which is a surprise.
That's a
Yeah.
surprise.
So just so everyone knows, there is Stephanie's slides are in the handout. You should see that in your GoToWebinar side panel. And if you want to download those to review them or to follow those links to Stephanie's paper that she mentioned, you can find that in the handouts. And I'm still oh, hey, Chad has saved us. We have a question. What is the status and current activities of the Gulf IEA program? In the presentation, the Gulf program was referenced as just the WFL Shelf and Keys region. Can you clarify?
There are more activities going on. The Gulf of Mexico IEA team partners with the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. On work in the sanctuary, they are also supporting nascent efforts to develop an ecosystem status report for the Caribbean. They also do produce an ecosystem status report for the Gulf of Mexico. It is not an annual report, but it comes out every couple of years, I believe. And they have worked on helping with the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion project. So those are a few that I can think of that are pretty varied in terms of the topics that they cover. Some are fisheries related and some are not, but in the ocean, most things do connect to fisheries. So I hope that helps. And again, if you go to the IEA website, there are project pages for each of the regions, and there's further details on the Gulf of Mexico work.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, I see that the South Atlantic was not included as one of the regions, and I was just wondering why that is.
Well, the IEA program itself is not currently working or supporting work in the South Atlantic. That said, there are still folks with NOAA Fisheries that have taken up producing an ecosystem status report. It's just not formally supported through IEA funding.
Great, thank you. Our next question, are there any standardized indicators across IEAs, or are they all specific to each IEA?
That's a great question. There are indicators that are assessed in each region, and then there are some that are individual to each region. NOAA recently launched a website. It's the National Ecosystem, National Marine. Oh my gosh, it's names. How come I'm forgetting this? But it's a NOAA website that provides access to indicators across all of the LME regions. And if you go to that website, it's very easy to see which ones are across all of the IEA regions, and then also some that aren't. So, for instance, coral indicators are only specific to 2 regions, and the other regions don't have them, as an example. So it varies. So, but things like sea surface temperature and chlorophyll and things that are more readily measured, maybe by satellite data, tend to be included in all of them.
Awesome, thanks, Stephanie. Our next question. With the dismantling of the FATE program, what do you now see as the primary way for NIMS to fund index development for the IEA program?
Well, the FATE program did become dismantled, but that hasn't stopped the development of indices and indicators within the regional within the regions, some of which are supported by IEA scientists and others that are supported by the science centers or other line offices. So I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question, but we can definitely, I can get back to you on that.
Great. Next question. What is the timeline for transitioning from static ESRs? Is it well underway or likely to only happen with additional support and or effort?
It kind of varies by region. So the transition is more forward, I would think, in the California Current in the Northeast than it is in other regions. But Alaska is very forward on digital access to the indicators and the status report. So it varies, but those three are much further ahead on it.
Great, thank you. Next question. Sorry, I may have missed this. What is the plans for the IEA in the next decade?
So we are looking at, well, on the future direction slide, a few things we are considering. Again, balancing the existing work with requests to expand NOAA IEAs is something that is very heavy on our minds because, again, we are a limited resource environment. But as people see how the approach can benefit engagement with stakeholders and managers to address problems, there is more interest in it. So in terms of that, we're looking at, whether we can expand to additional geographic regions formally. We're looking to expand partnerships and encouraging others to adopt the process because the process can be taken up with and used and not necessarily have to be a part of the NOAA IEA program. Others can use the process. Again, we're interested in developing approaches other than a full-blown management strategy evaluation to look at different management strategies, because depending on the amount of data and depending on the complexity of the problem, you may not need to do a full-blown MSE to be able to come up with recommendations for management. And we're definitely looking at, continued expansion beyond single species focus in terms of fisheries work. And then updating the products. Now, that said, we are in the process of developing our next 3-year national plan and the 3-year implementation plans. So the direction of the program is in some respects driven by the regional needs for each of the IEA teams and the most significant problems to address in their regions. So it varies.
Great, thank you. Following up on that, do you think this may be interesting to the UN Ocean Decade?
Yeah, perhaps. Yes, we definitely have, the IEA program does have connections with international work that's going on through ICES and Pisces. And so, yes, I could imagine that.
Katie, I have one question to follow up with Stephanie on this development of the future strategic plan and the meeting the needs of the regions. Just knowing that we have members of the public here, just curious, what would be the best advice, Stephanie, for folks who may be interested in contributing to that planning or commenting on that planning at the regional levels? Is there a on-ramp to do that for folks?
It's I think through contact with the regional IEA team members and discussions of how there might be partnering or leveraging of resources to address a program. But again, with the cautionary tale that, well, there's limited resources to support it, and there's that a lot of folks who work on IEAs support other aspects of EBM and EBFM in their regions and to the national program. And so, you know, we can't do everything that everybody might want to ask, but that's the most logical start is at the regional level.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and of course, you know, the steering committee is there to help, you know, have an overview of all the work that's going on in the regions and a balance there. And so, of course, you know, as we develop these plans, you know, the steering committee considers all the different projects that might be considered for the next 3 years.
Thanks, Stephanie. We did have one question following up on the UN Ocean Decade. Did the IEA team submit anything to the UN Ocean Decade?
Not at the national level, and I can't answer actually if it has at the regional level, but I'd be happy to follow up on that offline.
Great, thank you. That is the last of our questions, and I do believe, Stephanie, you indicated this would be a shorter presentation, so I will turn it over to Peg to share what is coming next.
Yes, thanks, Katie. And again, thanks, Stephanie. Great job. And if folks have any follow-up questions, you can please post that, and those will be shared with Stephanie after today's presentation. As I mentioned, our next seminar is April 14th at the same time, Wednesday, April 14th. And we'll be able to hear an update from the Northeast Regional Ocean Council team members. NROC, as it's finally called, is a federal state partnership formed in 2005, and it is there to serve as a forum to address regional coastal and ocean management challenges. And they have done an extraordinary job of developing a data portal that resource managers in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic region have been using. And I think it'd be a great opportunity to see what they've been doing over the last 4 years. And we hope to hear from some of the other regional planning entities. Again, these are entities that cross a couple of different sectors and are very involved in some key resource management decisions, in particular in the Northeast, the siting of wind turbines, and a number of other issues that are pending in the Northeast region. So I think it'd be very interesting to see what they've been able to do in compiling a very, very usable data portal. So we'll be hearing from that team on April 14th. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thanks to Stephanie and her team, and thanks Katie and the library team. So be safe, stay healthy, and hope to see you next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. As a reminder, this was recorded and will be posted on our YouTube shortly. Thank you.